Merry Christmas and welcome to Unleashing Happiness. I am your host, Cecilia Hendricks. I absolutely love the holiday season. I love the lights and the gifts and everything that goes around with it, spending time with family, baking, all of it, even the cold weather where I am here in the US. And I had some time to reflect this holiday season on kind of what I wanted to talk about since the mindset motivation episode was going to fall on Christmas, which I think is really beautiful that it's able to launch on the Christmas holiday. But I wanted to talk about the fact that when you are using your imaginal activity, that you can use it intentionally, but it's also always working unintentionally. So there's things that are happening to you and flowing into your life that may not be the stuff that you want. And it's because you're not intentionally focusing your attention, your imaginal activity, your mindset, the habits that you have each day. And so I'm reading from the lecture that Neville Goddard gave back in October of 1966. It's called Free or Slave. And I'm going to give kind of a bit of an overview about that lecture before we jump in today so that you can kind of have an understanding of what he's talking about in the lecture and the pieces that I'll be reading today. If you're new here, I definitely want to welcome you. This podcast is set up to teach you how to change your mindset, change your habits, and make actual sustainable changes in your life. So our identity and our state is framed by the way that we view ourselves, the belief that we have from ourselves, and it really starts internally. And then that gets reflected back to you from the world, and you're able to make changes on the way that you behave, the focus that you have, the attention that you're giving, the routines that you're maintaining. You're able to make a choice in that. And this podcast is really designed to give you the motivation, tips, tricks, kind of tools that I've used to make some really drastic, amazing changes in my own life. And hopefully you'll be able to use those then in your life. So in Neville Goddard's lecture that I'll be reading from today, he's talking about a gentleman that kind of shared a letter with him that was talking about not only his intentional acts and how he wanted to really kind of test what Neville was teaching because he had heard about Neville, but also was told that Neville was mad, essentially, that what Neville Goddard was teaching, and that's that your consciousness is God, that your I am blank is actually God being personified, that your consciousness is God, and that imagining creates reality. And so he had been told, Neville is the mad mystic, but when he put the teachings into practice, he proved them to himself twice in really remarkable ways, but then also had something else happen to him that really shocked him because it was an unintentional, imaginal activity that played out perfectly for him. And I know that I've had those same experiences in my own life where I have had something happen and I'm like, oh man, I can trace this back to an imaginal activity, a mindset, a belief, a thought that I continued to have. I can trace this back and see how this came to be in my world. And of course, a lot of things we forget about as humans. We may have planted this seed, had this kind of thought, put a lot of emotional charge behind it, but then moved on and not really recall that that's how that's tied together. And so the purpose of the lecture was to say, you really have a choice. You're either free or you're a slave to these imaginal activities. If the imaginal activity is going to continue to reflect within your life, you're going to see this mirror of the external world being shown back to you within your own mindset, the way you're perceiving the world, the way you're perceiving yourself within the world, etc. If you're going to have this happen, why not use it intentionally? Why not start to free yourself by learning this law, using it to your own benefit so that you can live the type of life that you want to? And it is so absolutely freeing when you realize that you are able to make a choice. You're able to make a choice in the way that you wake up. You're able to make a choice in the attention that you give something. You're able to make a choice in the way that you treat yourself. You're able to make a choice in the way that you spend your day and the routines that you keep, even onto the smallest of scales, to start doing something for you each and every day. When you realize that you have those choices, and that by making different choices than you're making today, you can lead a completely different life, it's very freeing and it's really remarkable. And when you look at it like that, of I'm just going to break this down to the absolute smallest of habits, the absolute smallest of changes in love for myself and doing something for me, it is completely sustainable, it's completely manageable, and it'll make drastic changes in your world. So this is reading from the start of the lecture. I make the statement that imagining creates reality, and I mean that seriously, that man should live as if it were true, just as if it were true. I don't care what it is, the most incredible thing in the world, as if it were true. And if he is faithful to that assumption and lives in that state, it'll come to pass. Of that I am convinced, and I know from personal experience. But to have it shared with me by those who come here when they tell me their stories. So here is his story. He said, sitting in an office, I was bored, and I thought there certainly must be a pleasant way of earning twice what I earn. There must be. So I made the decision right there and then that I would earn twice what I have now. I did it for a few days, and then after a few days, there's not a thing changed in my world. I wondered if this thing was right. Well, again, remembering my decision, I stopped it right there and then and reenacted the scene, not wondering what I would do. I didn't really specify what the job was I would do, simply that I was earning twice what I was at the moment earning. Then, 2 weeks later, a man that I had known for 3 years, and I had seen him weekly, and suddenly he began to urge upon me to come and work for him. He's never done that before. He was insistent, and when he mentioned a salary, it was exactly twice what I was earning. So I worked for him. While working for him, again, I said to myself, now this thing has worked, and so why should I work? Why not have an income equal to all that I need without this so-called work? And so this is what I did. I imagined that I went down to my postal box and I took out the letters. There were the usual things, correspondence and bills and things, but I saw an unidentified envelope. On my way back, I simply stopped and embraced and touched the trees that I so love on my way home. Then I opened it and I found a check for the amount that I thought I would need for a long non-working period. Then I saw it on my balance sheet from the bank that I added to what was there. And that's what I did. But I did it every night as I went to sleep. Well, then 2 weeks later, seeing no evidence of this whatsoever, I said to myself, are you going mad? I mean, this thing might be completely stupid. And then he said to me in a little aside, as I once thought that you were. So he was talking to Neville and saying, I once thought that you were mad. But 2 weeks later, after I did this night after night, and then I dropped it, I kept a date with a friend that I had made months and months ago. It was a dear old friend of mine, and I kept this date and I went up and spent a few days with him. While I was there, he had just inherited a sum of money from an unknown relative and urged upon me the amount that I had seen, and I took it. Here was the sum of money to the very dollar that I had seen in my account. He urged it upon me, so I took it. Now here I am doing the things I've wanted to do all of my life, without effort, enjoying every moment. Out on the beach, doing all these things without going to work. And someone calls, one I had never seen, and he asked me to come and work for him. Well, I said that I was so enjoying the kind of life that I'm living now that I don't want to work for anybody. But he was so persistent that he insisted that I would come. He also urged me to bring some of my work. I thought, well, I'll take it. I'll take the work now. So that day I went down to see him with some of my work. He asked me to bring some of my work, so I took it down. He was more than enthusiastic than ever in employing me and said to me, I want to show it right now. Not only show your work, but I want to show you to my top client. So we went right away to see him. Now, when I walked into that place, I instantly knew that I was here before. The wall panel against which I leaned, I had been here before. I know not physically, but I have been here before. The window through which I looked was exactly the same window through which I looked, not in my physical body, but I looked through that. I saw a tree or a plant. The plant that I saw was the exact plant I had seen. Everything was perfect as I had seen it, but not physically. The man himself was the man that I saw. I took the job, and now I daily talk with that man in that office against that paneled room, looking at the same plant through the same window. And so then when I came back, I remembered, and this is a great lesson that it taught me. I remembered that sitting one day at my desk, my mind wandered, and in my imagination, I wandered into that office, and I looked through that window. I saw that man. I saw that plant. I saw it. Now, this is my conclusion. Imagining creates reality in the most determined, definite manner man could ever imagine. It's not only the intentional, imaginal act that does it. Man is living by this all through the moments of time. Every moment he is living by it, whether he knows it or cares to know it. Whether or not he believes it or wants to believe it, he can't avoid this principle that imagining is creating reality. And it is not only the intentional, imaginal act, but every imaginal act, for I did not do that intentionally. So I admittedly had to read this a few times because I found it really confusing the way that it was written. So in a nutshell, the gentleman had two intentional activities, one to double his income and then one to have enough money so he didn't have to work for a while. And he intentionally focused on these. Even when he had doubts, he brought himself back to focusing on these, and it was very intentional. And so those two show your intentional activities can work. Then, though, he had this memory when kind of this man was very insistent that he come work for him. Then when he walked into the office, he had a memory of, oh my gosh, I've been in this office before in my imaginal activity. And that occurred to him then, oh, wait a minute. It's not just my intentional imaginal activity that's going to play out for me. That's not the only thing that I'm going to get reflected. And it doesn't matter whether I believe in this or don't believe in this. And you'll see that a lot of times with people where they're like, I don't believe in that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, you don't believe in it, but yet I can actually see it playing out in your life through, my assumptions and your assumptions. This is actually happening. And that was the biggest turning point probably for me with these teachings, was when I started being really honest about the stuff that was happening to me and where my focus was, my inner dialogue, the habits, the routines that I was keeping. I could trace them all back when I started paying attention. So you make a choice. That's what it means to either be free or to be a slave. It's because you have a choice. You can make a choice today that you're going to start to make the small changes to your mindset, your habits, your routines, so that you can live a life that's more aligned to the type of life that you want to live, enjoying life, enjoying the people that you have in your life, enjoying the finances that you have in your life. It just takes a little bit of dedication and really mental discipline in order to figure out what's going to work for you and how you can get this to work and apply in your life. So back to Neville's lecture, he says he brings out what I think is something that is fantastic. Aside from knowing this law, he said, not only the intentional, imaginal act produces itself in an experience, the unintentional act does as well. Every imaginal act is producing itself in this world. Whether or not you want to hear it or whether or not you believe it makes no difference. It is still producing itself in the world. So therefore, why not become intentional about it? Why not take the helm and steer the ship like this? We're all at sea, as it were, and we're either drifting or we can take hold of that helm and really go towards the port that we want to be. It's entirely up to us. The greatest steps forward in this world were made by men and women who imagined as if it were. That's what they did. They simply imagined things as if they were, and they rebuilt a world based upon the imaginal acts of these bold spirits that imagined as if it were. So I want to leave you with that today. I know this is kind of a short episode for me, but I want you to consider today, as you go through your Christmas and you're spending time with your family and we're going into the new year, Are you being a slave to just whatever imaginal activity is the habit and the routine that you're normally falling into and you've fallen into now very unintentionally and asleep and not paying attention? Or are you going to wake up today and make a choice that you're going to start to pay attention to something different, that you're going to start to steer your own ship and make some real decisions for the way that you want to live your life, the things that you want to focus on, things that you want to do. The world is literally your oyster. You can wake up and make whatever kind of changes you want to in your life. You have the ability and the capability to say, I'm done with this and I'm going to have something different for me because I deserve it and I want it. And then you can start to make the changes within the way that you're treating yourself, talking to yourself, and the way that you're spending your day and your time to start to make that life a reality for you. And it all starts up within your own imagination. So I hope you have a wonderful Christmas. I hope if you're hearing this after Christmas, you have a beautiful new year. I am really excited for what's to come. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out. My email is unleashinghappiness@ceciliahendricks.com. Talk soon. Have a beautiful week. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this episode and got benefit out of it, please share it out with somebody else that you think would get benefit from it as well. I would greatly appreciate it. And it's like one of the biggest compliments that you can actually give me is by sharing this out with your network. I hope that you have a beautiful week and I will see you soon.